there are a couple of mysteries in life, and birth and death, probably cover the two greatest existential crises of our lives. And what I mean by that is, we choose neither for the most part. We are, in a sense, propelled into this world, and we are propelled out. And in between, we have to try and make some sense of what this is all about. Why we are here, is there a meaning and a purpose to our life, what happens at death, and is there anything afterwards? And I suppose just as if we can use the analogy for a child in the womb, birth must be a great mystery and a great unknown. In some respects, I think we are all still children in the womb, for which the next life is an unknown quantity, except for what has been revealed to us. Religion, in most of its forms, has something to do with death, and it's no coincidence, because it is the one thing that we will all have to face. It is the one thing that we least understand, and it is the one thing that we really cannot study, as we do so many other things in this life. So, it is in many respects a mystery. It is impossible for us to comprehend and interpret it. And there have been very few who have been able to talk about death post the event, as in after it's happened to them. There is a very poignant story that Jesus tells us in the Gospels of a man called Lazarus, a poor man who dies and goes into the afterlife, and then the rich man outside whose house he was living also dies and goes into the afterlife. And the rich man is, in a sense, sentenced to hell. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. But he tells Abraham, who he sees in the afterlife, he says to him, "Please go to my brothers, send Lazarus back to earth to my brothers, and to tell them about what it's like down here, so they might experience what I'm experiencing." And Abraham responds to him and says, "If they have not believed Moses and the prophets, they will not believe anyone, even if one comes back from the dead." Well, we have someone that has come back from the dead, and that's Jesus Christ. And what he reveals to us and what he shows us about life after death, through the scriptures, through the experience of the saints and the life of the church, is what I would like to talk about this evening. Before I start, I'm just going to have do a little brief survey of different ideas that people have thought about death throughout the centuries. Starting from the ancient times, we have Eastern religions. I'm talking about India and China, Hinduism and Buddhism in particular, who have a very particularly low view of the present world, as in death becomes a sort of liberation from this world, and through a series of reincarnations, you eventually move on to nirvana, what Buddhists will call nothingness. You just disappear ultimately, and the whole struggle of our life here on earth is to disappear, which betrays, I think, a very pessimistic view of this life and what it's all about. The ancient Greeks had the things like the Orphic myth, where the soul is trapped in a material and sinful body at birth, and it returns again and again, it's reincarnated, so that it can be purified and ultimately escape the body. And I think as we'll look at some of these different understandings of death, we'll see that this tension between the soul and the body is a very real one. And many in the ancient world considered the body to be really a prison that contains the soul, and the aim of our life is to escape prison. The Olympian religion of ancient Greece considered death as an abhorrent and horrible and fearful thing. When you died, your soul was then forever trapped in Hades, in a sort of semi-life, half-life. So the ancient Greeks didn't like death at all. You know, it was not the opening to a new and better life. It was actually, there was continuation, but there was no real life afterwards. The Babylonians had a similar understanding. The Egyptians believed in the immortality of the soul. There was no sense of reincarnation, of coming back to earth again, and the soul would live on. The ancient Greek philosophers began to take steps away from the Olympian understanding, and they thought a great deal about death. You know, Socrates would say that ultimately philosophy is a meditation on death. You know, many of our saints would agree that to reflect on death helps us to live life the way it should be lived. The ancient Greek philosophers considered death as something good. In order to attain truth, the soul would have to escape from the body to be able to see clearly what this life and what existence is all about. So death would be a release, a separation from the body. Again, the sense of the body is a prison, and the aim is to escape the body and to move on beyond the prison. Aristotle considered death as better than life, and he writes, "Not to be born at all is the best of all conditions, and dying is preferable to living." Very pessimistic, but certainly something that has been echoed in modern times as well by people like Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existential philosopher of the mid-20th century, who said, there is no meaning to the fact that we are born, there is no meaning to the fact that we die. It's pure chance and meaninglessness that we're here, pure chance and meaninglessness that we die, and there is nothing really in between. And in some respects, that attitude, that kind of attitude, is probably the prevailing attitude of our times. We tend to ignore death as much as is possible, and when it does come, we clinicalize it, so we place it in hospitals and in institutions, and then we are separated from our daily existence as quickly as possible. That wasn't always the case, and from traditional Orthodox countries that we come from, the rituals around death were very much part of daily life. So it was all around, and yet it wasn't treated with the same morbidity and the same fear that we tend to approach it with, because there tended to be a real hope, which we have lost in our modern world. So let's go back and look at what death is for Christians, where did it come from, and how it wasn't defeated by Christ. When we study death, we study it under divine revelation. There have been people that have had out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, and there have been certain data that we've picked up and that scientists have picked up from people that have been dead for a few minutes or a few hours, and they come back and they talk about their experiences. And it's interesting that there are certain things that are common to these people when they come back, and they give us particular points of data that actually don't really conflict at all with the Orthodox understanding of death, but they don't totally reflect it either, because it's such a short duration of time that follows these people's death, in the minutes or the hours at the most. I mean, what we do learn from these people, though, people that have had these near-death experiences, is first of all that death does not constitute the annihilation of the human person. Death is not the end. Life in some way, or consciousness in some way, continues after death. The soul is separated from the body, but maintains its own self-consciousness. It doesn't sleep. What's the first stories that people say that they came out and see themselves lying on the operating table, and the doctor's trying to save them, and then at times they just ended there because they were resuscitated. So the soul is able to understand itself and is able to, in a sense, have some sort of sense perception, despite the fact that it is out of the body. It continues to think, to have feelings such as fear, sorrow, joy, etc. And some people describe, the fact that they didn't want to go back into their bodies, or they had these experiences of light or joy, or peace that was coming through. So there is consciousness there. After death, the soul maintains its memory intact, remembering things that have happened. And also, one of the last points is that the soul has senses that correspond to the bodily senses of sight, hearing, etc. So even though there's no body, because the soul is outside the body, it's somehow they can hear, they can see, there is sense perception there, despite the fact that you don't have the body as a medium for getting those perceptions. So those are the kinds of things that people have talked about when they've come back from out-of-body or near-death experiences. But they don't give the full answer. They are limited in time, but they don't contradict anything that the Church has said either. In fact, they probably provide the first few inklings of what actually will happen afterwards. But because it's about as far as we can get, scientifically or medically speaking, we can only really rely on revelation. And revelation means something that has been given to us, information or knowledge that has been given to us by God in particular forms. And that comes through the scriptures, through the Bible. It comes through the saints' experiences of the spiritual world. And experiences that aren't just individual and idiosyncratic or just one or two saints, but that have been repeated over and over again and have become the common experience of the Church. So when we talk about that, we go right back to the Garden of Eden, and there we see that God creates Adam and Eve, the first man and the first woman out of dust, and that when he creates Adam's body, he then breathes into it. And the Bible tells us that Adam becomes a living soul. So the human being has got a dual nature, body and soul. And it is only together that we are fully human as body and soul. There in paradise, humanity was in total communion, or the closest possible relationship with God. And they were called to become more and more like God and to enter into an eternal relationship with Him. Now, when Adam and Eve were created, they weren't created either immortal or mortal. It was their choice as to what they were going to be. Whether they were going to experience corruption, that is, sickness and death, or whether they would move towards incorruption, towards immortality. Because God created us with a free will. And it's only by having a free will that we're able to choose God or not. Some associated issues with what we're talking about, would be why is there suffering, why does God allow suffering and death and things like that, or bad things to happen. And that's a whole talk in itself, as opposed to what we want to talk. But just as principle here is that God created everything good, but He gave us choice and He gave us freedom. Because without choice and without freedom, we would be robots. Everything that has been given to us freely by God, but also has to be accepted by us freely as well. And that's when we come into a relationship with God. God gave Adam and Eve a command in the garden. Very simply, it was a command not to eat of a particular fruit of a tree. It was ironically, it was a command to fast. There was basically. It was a test of their free will, a test of whether they would approach God in the way that God intended, or whether they would seek to fulfill their own will. And without going into the total story, they were tempted by the devil, they disobey God, they eat of this fruit. And even though God had warned them, saying that if you eat of this fruit, you will die, they ate, and they died. The act of eating, I suppose, we'll call sin, disobedience to God. And the consequence is death. Sin and death are very closely interlocked. They died two deaths. The first was a spiritual death, and that occurred immediately. They were disconnected from God immediately. St. Gregory Palamas says, as soon as disobedience was accomplished, the soul of Adam was separated from God and died. When our soul is disconnected from God, it dies. We can imagine God being a PowerPoint, and our soul is connected through this PowerPoint, and God's life and power and energy come and animates us, gives us life. When we pull the plug, then that connection is lost. Now, our spiritual connection is lost with the power source, but there's a little bit of a battery still there. And over time, the energy in the battery is going to go down, and eventually that will run out. And that's the second death, which is our physical death, which is a consequence of us being disconnected from God. And this physical death is the separation of our soul from our body. So spiritual death is our soul being disconnected from God, and as a result of that, eventually at some point, our soul will be separated from our body. We experience death both spiritually and physically. And it is the most horrible experience, because we're not meant to die. And somewhere deep within each and every one of us, there is a will and a desire to live. We fight against death with every possible means. We create hospitals and health systems and every possible system of welfare imaginable in the first world in order to prevent death from happening. And so successful have we been that the great issues of our time now, especially ethics in hospitals, is when do you let someone die? And we grapple with that now, as to when do we allow someone to die. So death now is a universal phenomenon. Every human being dies. And because of Adam and his sin, everyone is born mortal. Everyone who is born is going to die. So, who is responsible for death? Well, God ultimately has foreknowledge. He knows everything that is going to happen. But he did not will death. He allowed it, he permitted it, because it was our choice. God's will for us is that we live forever. We chose separation from God because we thought we could do it on our own. We grasped that and took and snatched what He was going to give to us anyway. But we wanted it on our terms, and that's the story of the human race. We wanted it all on our terms. It's only when we become humbled enough, and usually, life beats us around enough that we begin to realise that we can't have things that we want on our terms. That we then turn to God. But the punishment, if we can call death a punishment, I would say it's almost a natural consequence. But itself was, in some respects, a blessing from God. Because of death, well, firstly, sin does not live forever. For those who have ever done history, you can think of some particularly evil people in the history of the world whom we are glad could not live forever. God actually allows sin to die, even with us. At some point we will stop sinning because of death. St. Gregory of Nyssa says, death is given to us to restrain evil. And St. Basil says our sickness through death doesn't become eternal. Eventually it has an end. And that is a good thing. I remember a priest, friend of mine, was once asked by a particularly obnoxious parishioner. He says, what are you priests going to do when one day science develops the medicine of immortality? No one dies anymore, no one's scared of death, and you'll be out of a job. And the priest said he just walked away because it was a bit of a difficult conversation. Thought about it, then he went back to him and says, if science or medicine ever develops this medicine of immortality and we get to live forever, he says, you people are going to come to us so that we can pray that you die. We can't live forever. It is, you ask some old people in their 80s and in their 90s, it's exhausting. By that age, even if you've had a really great life, you've done all there is to do. Experiences are just experiences. There's eventually people often say, really old people say, please just gone, I just pray to God to take me. We cannot live forever, not under these conditions, not under these circumstances. It becomes a release. It also restrains our pride, becomes our Achilles heel. No matter how much we achieve, no matter how ambitious we are, no matter how successful we are, we know that in the end it all has to be given up. The challenge for us, I suppose, in this life is to learn to, in a sense, release things ourselves rather than being snatched from us at the end. And the kind of investment that we place in our life, during our life, will be what we will reap at the end. One thing about being a priest, to see people coming towards the end of their life, and you see, because you know them for a while, you see their character really comes into play at the end. All the stuff that they have invested in their life plays out at the end. If they were spiritual people, or if it's a sense of spirituality, or at least some sort of striving for a common good, then you see that played out right at the end. As they struggle with death, they struggle with their relationship with God, they struggle to find peace. If their life was spent just making money, and that was their whole focus and their whole purpose, and there was nothing beyond that, they're still doing that on their deathbed. We're seeing people, organising the rates bills and the electricity bills of their rental properties, while they're hours away from death. We allow ourselves to be captured by the things that we invested in this life. We will become, as Jesus told us, you can either be a servant of God or a servant of man. You cannot have two masters. One will take over in this life. Death also, according to the ancients and according to the church fathers, becomes the basis for a sound philosophy of life. So rather than it being just a morbid focus, it actually allows us to reflect on life and to live life as it should be lived. But God loved us and did not want us to remain in death and in corruption forever. So, just as death came through one man, through Adam, so new life, eternal life, resurrection from the dead comes through one man, Jesus Christ, whom St. Paul calls the new Adam in the Scriptures. Our Lord Jesus Christ is the second person of the Holy Trinity. He's God Himself, who was incarnated, as we say in our creed, by the Holy Spirit and the Virgin Mary. In Jesus Christ, God the Logos receives a human body free from corruption and sin. Jesus, God, the second person of the Trinity, the Logos, had become a human being if Adam and Eve had not sinned. Well, we know for sure there will be no cross, there will be no need for Him to die, because there will be no death. But would He have become a human being? Would there be an incarnation? And while there are no hypotheticals, and it's all conjecture ultimately from our position here, the fathers tend to say yes, He would. It was always God's intention, they would argue, for Him and for us to be one. For God to become man, and for us to become gods by grace. For humanity and divinity to be joined together in Him. And while it would have been a different scenario played out in the absence of death, the incarnation was not plan B. The incarnation is plan A, God coming to us, but now with a new task, to die with us, to live with us, and to die with us. So the first thing that expresses God's love for us is that He who is incorrupt, He who has experienced no sin, He who does not need to die because He is God Himself and fully connected with God the Father, He chooses death in order to live our life and to die with us. So we do not die alone. No one ever dies alone. Now, for those that are believers, we die with our Lord. We die with Him next to us, we die with Him beside us, because He died first. The only one, in a sense, who did not deserve to die. And because Jesus obeys God even to death, He justifies the whole human race. Just as sin entered through one man, so salvation now enters the world through one man. He defeats the devil and annihilates death, both spiritual first and ultimately physical death. Why did Christ have to die in order to save us? Because salvation, as Orthodox understand it, is a victory over death. It's a victory over mortality. It is the victory of life over death. As we say in the Paschal hymn, Christ is risen from the dead, by death trampling on death, and on those in the tombs bestowing life. We should have died. He takes our place. He takes on the curse of death as the only one who did not deserve it. St. Paul says He died for all, and now through Him all have a chance to live forever. When Jesus dies on Great Friday, the scriptures tell us that he descends, he goes into Hades, and there he, into the underworld in a sense, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment, and there he proclaims to all those who had died before him, to all the Old Testament, he proclaims to them the gospel. And those who believe, he takes with him to paradise. So his message wasn't just for his own time, or for his time, for the time afterwards, but he also for everyone beforehand. So all have the chance of hearing and all have the chance of understanding. His resurrection confirms his victory, death is reversed, and death is conquered at Pascha, at Easter. We can talk about, perhaps another talk one day, about the evidence for the resurrection of Christ, but it is an experience, and today a historical experience that has been slandered throughout the last 2,000 years as to how impossible it is. And yet, even if we look at it forensically as lawyers, it becomes the only possibility of what could have happened at that point in time. But the experience of resurrection is something that the Church has had from that time onwards. Now, Pascha, especially, every liturgy, but Pascha especially, is a participation in Christ's death and resurrection. And the reason why we believe it and accept it is not because we just accept a particular datum or a particular fact from 2,000 years ago and say that's true. It is that. But more importantly, it is because it has been repeated in the life of Christians for the last 2,000 years. We see it especially in the lives of the saints. We see it highlighted in the lives of the saints. The presence of life amongst us, even before physical death. It is that experience and that certainty that we take with us day to day. So before Christ, death was a fearful thing. Death was a cause of great sorrow. But now, it has lost its potency. It has lost its power. The Apostle Paul again in the scripture says, "Death, where is your sting?" Yes, you're still around, but you have no power. It doesn't hurt anymore, he's saying. In fact, he goes on to say, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Whether I'm in the body or out of it, it makes absolutely no difference to me now. I am with Christ. If I live in this world, I live with Christ. If I die and move to the next world, I live with Christ. There is no power, no fear in death anymore. And in a very real sense, the Church Fathers teach us that how we live our life here doesn't just determine where we're going to go afterwards, but it actually is where we will be afterwards. If we are in heaven here, and by heaven, I don't mean things are growing great for us, and we're getting all the stuff that we need, but we are with Christ, then we will be with Christ afterwards. Death is only a doorway to a fulfillment of one or the other. If we are in hell here, and by hell we mean an absence of God from our life, then we'll be in hell afterwards. But the death is no longer a powerful thing. Our Archbishop Spinos once described it to us when we were students as he's saying to us, think of we could think of it, but it's just imagine, because during World War II, and I'm sure in frequent times since the time, in countries with economic crises, you have currencies that are, we used to exchange to buy and sell goods, and then, you have inflation, the currencies just disappear, or the government passes a law. And give us the example of Greece just at the end of World War II, where one day, there was a particular currency, the next day the government passed a law, all your money was worthless, and you had to go get a new currency. He's saying, the old currency was still around. People still have it in their pockets, they have it in their bank accounts, It was there, you could see it, you could touch it, but it had no power anymore. You couldn't hand it over to someone. You couldn't buy anything with it. So death is like that. Spiritual death is destroyed immediately by Christ and through baptism and through our participation in the sacraments and the mysteries of the Church. We become reconnected with God through the PowerPoint, and we receive God's life again within us. Right? Physical death is still around, and we have to go through it. We have to bear the consequences of what happened, but it no longer has its potency. It is more like a sleep. And so, in the Orthodox Church, when someone dies, we talk about them falling asleep, because it is not permanent. It is not the end. But at best, it's an interim state. The time of our death is unknown. We know that we are going to die, but we don't know when and how we are going to die. Jesus, in talking about his own second coming, would say that he would come like a thief in the night. Says, when you least expect it, I will return. Death, for each and every one of us, is like our own personal second coming of Christ. It will come like a thief in the night. We don't know when. We know it will come, but we don't know when. And Jesus says to his listeners, he says, if the householder knew when the thief would come, he would just wait for him, at that particular point in time. But because he does, he says that you have to be vigilant. You have to, in a sense, be prepared. Why is it unknown? Why doesn't God let us know exactly what the time of our death will be? Firstly, because even though we know death is coming, and even though we understand that there are consequences with it, it's impossible to have a real relationship with God if we live constantly with the fear of death. Because it creates a layer of fear, of an unspiritual, a devilish fear, which seeks to bind and to paralyze spiritually. If we knew when we were going to die, it would be the most destructive thing in our life. Any good that we did would just come totally out of it as a response to fear, and the rest of our life would be spent in a state of spiritual paralysis. It would lead us to despair. St. John Chrysostom says it would lead us to such a negative spiritual state that we would try and ignore everything until the last possible moment, but we couldn't ignore it anymore. And unfortunately, that's what most of us tend to do. We have this vision in our mind of when we're going to die. It's usually when we're deep into our 80s, if not later. And then we try to live the rest of our life, ignoring that part of it. But we really don't know. Death now becomes a passage into eternity. When we experience death, other people's death, which is always good to, for our own reflection on death, St. Paul tells us that we are not to weep and we're not to mourn or to be sorrowful as those who have no hope, but we are to mourn as people with hope. It's natural to shed tears and to cry when someone we love dies. It's the most natural thing in the world. Jesus himself shed tears at the tomb of Lazarus, his friend, even though he was about to resurrect him in a few minutes' time. Death is unnatural, Death is not something to be desired, but it is not the end. And so just as we may shed tears for a loved one who is going away on a long journey, because the separation is painful, it's a similar scenario. The separation is painful, but there is hope of a meeting again. So, in thinking about death, the fathers tell us we should reflect on death, but not fear it. We should reflect on it in order to help us live a good life, to avoid sin, and to embrace the virtues. So it's just like the acquisition of knowledge. If the test is your only motivator, then eventually you may cram some stuff, but you never ever learn really. Yeah. So when we talk about living the Christian life, the fathers will say that it goes in 3 steps. The first is the fear of punishment, which is a very basic thing about human psychology. The first thing that you teach a child is fear, really. Don't do it because I will get angry or spank them. Or you're going to get yourself hurt. So it's fear. And fear becomes a way of learning. But then as you learn with fear, then the Father says you have to move on to the next level. And the next level is the promise of good things to come. It is heaven. It is what your reward is going to be. So you go from punishment to reward. That's a big thing in education as well. Okay, reward for the good behaviour. Okay, and then the Father says, well, that isn't even good enough. What you're doing is to avoid hell and to get into heaven. Well, the motivation hasn't matured. The ultimate motivation is love. To do it out of love for Christ and love for your neighbour. And it's then that we begin to experience what heaven is really, because we are motivated. We're no longer motivated from any selfish inclinations. That's ultimately the question, and it is, I think, when we see it from Judaism, we see it fulfilled in Christianity, is that the whole human person, body and soul, is understood to be valued and important. That this world, corrupt, imperfect as it may be, was actually created good. And it is through this world that we'll be able to come to the next world. And that this world in the end will not be destroyed, but will be renewed by God. So whereas many Eastern religions perceive life as a circle, a series of repetitions, which ultimately lead you to escape from this world, we have a more linear understanding of history, where there is a beginning, since there is an end. What happens in the middle is important and determines the end. But that end is not a destruction of this world. As we'll see in a moment, death itself doesn't have the final say, the separation of the soul from the body. But ultimately God will restore both the body and the soul to each and every one of us. And just as we were in the beginning, He will renew us into eternity, so that our own personality, our own personhood remains preserved. We don't disappear as a drop in a massive ocean of nirvana. We do enter God, but we enter with our faculties, with our personality, with the being of who we are. So who we are at this point in time is precious and important to God, but it is a limited, perhaps even poor reflection of our potential as to what we can be in God if we follow Christ's commandments. More specifically then, as the second half of the talk, we've talked about death in general. Now, how do we understand our own particular death? suppose, and what happens at death, and how does the church respond to that. So we said, going back from the Garden of Eden, that death is the separation, physical death ultimately, is the separation of the body of the soul, the inner person from the outer person. The body and the soul influence one another. They depend on one another. It is the soul that animates or gives life to the body. When someone is dead, you can see the body there, you see there, everything is there, and yet something is missing. And what is missing is the life, the breath of life that God gives to each one of us. But the body also affects the soul. Physical sickness can affect the way we feel and the way we live, and the complexities and connections between psychological and physical sicknesses, and have become more and more acute in our time as we understand that there are psychosomatic interactions between how we feel and how our body reacts, and vice versa. But ultimately, the difference between the soul and the body is that the soul is essentially independent of the body. It can survive without the body in some sense, as we mentioned before. And death is the exodus of the soul from the body. So, what happens at death, as we understand in the Orthodox tradition? At death there is a separation of the body and the soul, and this separation is performed both for the righteous and the sinners, for the good people and the bad people, by an angel. God provides an angel for us at that point, because God is the master of life. And this angel then escorts the soul from the body. And in our tradition we are told that for 2 days or so, and when we use the term days now, it's after death, so again it's used more for our benefit from this side of the grave rather than from the other side, because time will be totally different beyond, but time still does exist. But the fathers say that for about 2 days or so, the soul has a relative freedom, and it begins to visit places that it knew, and even people that it knew and experienced in this world. Now, most of the out-of-body and near-death experiences that have come to us are during this period of time. Okay, this relatively pleasant period of time, immediately after death. And on the 3rd day, the soul is called to ascend to heaven. Death is it's real, but it is it is a tragic, and it is an extraordinary, difficult process for people. And that is why the Church accompanies death with so many services and prayers. The services and the prayers are not really for the living. We tend to explain them in terms of comforting the living, celebrating the life of the one who was passed. But for Orthodox Christians, you can do bits and pieces of that, but the main focus is the person who has died, because they need our prayers now in this journey. They need us to accompany them. It is a traumatic event, the most traumatic event we could ever go through. And the comfort they take is from our prayers. So that is why at the point of death, and you may want to correct me if there's a particular tradition in the Serbian church that is different, as well, just fill it and tell me. At the point of death, the priest is called to read a memorial service or a pisagi when the person has died, usually as soon as possible. Again, it's the first step of us accompanying this with our prayers, the person into the next life. And then, we have these memorial prayers, or pisagi, we call them in Greek, done at particular points. So it's at the point of death, and then it's on the 3rd day is the next one. And the third day is at this point when the soul is now called to ascend to heaven. It is appointed to man once to die, and after this the judgment, says St. Paul. Everyone is to die, and everyone will be judged. Those who have attained a perfect love for God in this life are not brought to judgment. The ultimate example of this is the Theotokos, the Holy Virgin. She received Christ. She lived a life of total obedience and perfect love in this world. When she died, and she died because she also was born into a corrupt world with a mortal body. When she died, she was buried. Right? And then, tradition tells us, as the tomb was exhumed, so that Thomas, the absent apostle, who paid his last respects to her, they found the body missing. That she was taken into heaven, body and soul, as we all will be one day, who have joined ourselves to Christ. Body and soul are in heaven. But she is the only one at this point who has achieved that, or who has experienced that. We honour her so much because she has lived out in her life what the potential of every human being is. To be united to God, body and soul. She has moved beyond judgment, beyond even the second coming of Christ. She is with him, body and soul, in heaven. We believe this about none of the other saints, only about her. All the other saints, as with everyone else who dies, are waiting for the final judgment where the bodies will be raised again, spiritual bodies, to be joined to their soul. It's this journey, in a sense, to heaven and this judgment that is taking place that is really what we commemorate around the 40-day mark when we do memorial services on the 40th day. And that is why they are so important, because we are, at that point, we are accompanying the soul on judgment, or to judgment. Now, once the soul has been judged by God, and again, the fathers will tell us many times that in the end, it won't be God who really will be judging us, we will be judging ourselves. That it's, God doesn't really send anyone to hell, to heaven. God is everywhere, God fills all things. And while we, there is a sense in which heaven and hell are both spiritual places, they are also states of being. So, if we love God and love being with God, then it's heaven. If we hate God and we hate being with God, then it's hell. People can be in the same context and in the same environment and have two different experiences of it. We can both be in church, we can all be in church, and one person could be enjoying it and taking it all in and being raised to some sort of sublime level of worship, and the other person is looking at their watch and standing too long, and it's boring and it's painful, and when is this going to finish? For one person it's heaven, for the other person it's hell. And that isn't a bad image as to what our experience will be like afterwards. For those for whom God's presence is joy and warmth and love, that's what it will be afterwards. And for those who God's presence is judgment and hatred and something we wish just to avoid at all costs, will be the same thing afterwards. The difference is that before we die, we can actually change our attitude. After we die, we can't change our attitude. That's what the past tells us. We make our decisions in this life. And after this particular judgment, and it's called particular because it's individual to each person, the soul enters a sort of middle state. Okay, we don't believe in purgatory, as the Roman Catholics at least used to do. There is no place where we are purified of our sins, and then we go to heaven after a period of how many months or years or centuries of purification, depending on how bad we were. But we do believe that we gain a foretaste of our ultimate destination. So if we are on the path to heaven, then we gain a foretaste of heaven. If we're on our path to hell, then we gain a foretaste to hell. And so, in this middle state, where we are conscious, where there is self-consciousness, the soul actually depends on people here to pray for it, memorial services, liturgies, to offer acts of charity and love for it. Every single person. We don't judge them, because we don't know the total context of their life. We leave that to God. But our hope for everyone is salvation and paradise. And that's why the prayers of the funeral and the memorial services are always hopeful in that. We don't know ultimately God's criteria. We don't bind God with our prayers, but our prayers and supplications become an offering to God. At the very least, they can comfort and provide some relief to those who are suffering. At the most, maybe God changes his mind, and that's what we call anthropomorphism, which doesn't make sense. But we allow God, for God to judge in a way that best knows how. All our acts of prayer can have repercussions that we are not even aware of. So, keep praying. So, in this middle state, we call this the positive experience, paradise, and we call the negative experience, Hades, to distinguish them ultimately from heaven and hell, which will be after the second coming of Christ. So, those souls that are moving towards God in peace and love, it's paradise. For those souls that are suffering difficulties, it's Hades. In this state, there is nothing that the soul can do to save itself. The point of death is the final point that we can make decisions for ourselves. And the fathers tend to insinuate that it's not as if God is preventing us, as in here we are in Hades and we want to get to paradise and we think, God, why don't you let me go? I've changed my mind. This isn't a good place. It's that we don't want to anymore. Or we can't, we don't have it in us. And, I always try to find analogies, that we can perhaps connect to as to why would you want to, when you could. And perhaps you think in your life, have there been situations where you have been so hurt by someone, or you've developed such a hatred for someone, that you need to let it go, but you just feel you can't, or you won't, or it's just not going to happen, or situations in life where, and for those that have experienced mental illness, you can be so depressed that you ought to be acting differently, because it's for your own good that you would, but you just can't bring yourself, or you no longer have the strength within yourself to do so. I think is something like that. You know, we may see the good, but either we don't want it anymore, that we prefer just to stew in our own hatreds and passions, or even if we want to, we cannot find strength within us, so we're totally passive. The Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky wanted a beautiful image of what this was going to be like. And in one of his books, he writes about this old Russian lady who was a really mean, evil old witch. She was next to poor herself. She lived in this village in Russia, and she would share and do nothing with anyone. She wouldn't give anything to anyone. She was all about her. And you know, one day she gets a knock on the door, and this pauper, transient pauper, comes through and begs for something to eat. And in one of her moments of weakness, she throws an onion at him and gives him something to eat. She dies, and she goes to Hades, to hell. And while she's in there, there are other people further down. She can see people suffering. She wants to escape from this place. She doesn't like it. She sees that at one point this giant onion coming down towards her. The only good act, the only good deed that she had ever done in her life is now coming to save her. So this onion comes down and she sees my onion. So she grabs onto this onion, and it begins to pull her out. Okay, and then these other people around see that she's getting out. Okay, so they try to grab the onion, they try to grab her. They want to get out with her. She's being pulled out. And she just turns around, she looks at them and says, "Get away! This is my onion." The onion breaks, and she falls back down into hell. She judged herself. Nothing had changed. In the end, she was who she allowed herself to become. And even at the point of salvation, where it's offered to her all over again, she couldn't see beyond her own selfishness. It had to be her and no one else. And that's what we talk about in judgment. That's the kind of thing the Father's are getting at. But it's about us. It's about the choices that we make. It's about choices that we won't relent from, because we won't have the power to do so afterwards. So we mentioned the kinds of things that we can do to help the soul in this middle state between now and the second coming. The prayers, the commemorations, the third day, the 9th day, the 40th day, annual commemorations, the Saturday of the Souls, which are Saturdays in the year, which we remember all those who have passed before us. Acts of fasting and almsgiving and good works in memory of people. All these things play a part for them, but also informing us in prayer, forming us in acts of charity and love. And then finally, there will come a time when all of this world, in a sense, as we see and understand it, will be renewed. And there will be Christ's second coming and the general resurrection of the dead, which we see Jesus describing towards the end of the Gospel of Matthew, where it says he's seated on a great white throne, and he calls all the nations before him and divides them into the sheep and the goats. And this will be a judgment where our bodies will be raised again. And St. Paul says, spiritual bodies in this case, much like Christ's body was a spiritual body in his resurrection. He could walk through doors, appear and disappear. It will be a renewed spiritual body, which will be far less fleshly than this. This body that we have now is a consequence of the fall, where we fell from paradise, in a sense, to this world, took on the garments of skin. But this will be a renewed spiritual body that will be more tune with our own spiritual nature. And then we will be judged, body and soul. Because it was neither our soul that sinned alone, nor our soul that did good deeds alone, but it was the union of both, and both will be judged. And that's what we call the last judgment, the final judgment, the second coming of Christ. And then there will be a separation, the end of all things as we know and understand it, but the beginning of a future life, of eternity and bliss, a dynamic movement further into God and into the knowledge and experience of God for those who have sought that in this life, and for those who have not. The Father's described certain aspects of things, especially in terms of isolation, because ultimately what separates us from God and from each other is our own selfishness and self-love. And in the end, hell, both heaven and hell, are going to be the fulfillment of those things we have searched for. For those who have searched for love, love of God, love of neighbour, will be that fulfillment. For those who have searched for self-love, well, we'll get to spend eternity with the person we love most, ourselves. And that will be by choice. Well, cremation, first of all, that's the easy one. Well, we're against that. We're against it. We're against it. And we are against it exactly for the reasons that we mentioned, because the body is something that is holy. The body, St. Paul says, it is the temple of the Holy Spirit. It is the body that has been baptized in water. It is the body that has received Holy Communion. It is the body that has been anointed with holy oil. It is the body that has knelt in prayer. It is the body that has fasted. It is the body that has done prostrations. The soul cannot be sanctified except through the body, and vice versa. The body is all of these things, and when it dies, when it goes through this unnatural experience, it is laid to rest in hope of resurrection. So burial becomes a witness of our future hope. Now, it doesn't mean that the body isn't going to decompose and disappear ultimately. It will do that. And what is raised afterwards will be a spiritual body. But again, I think somehow the spiritual is not totally disconnected to the previous body. It is our faith and our hope that is played out in burial. And the flip side to that, of course, is that many of our saints we recognise as saints because their bodies perform miracles, because their bodies have received grace. It is through their bodies, even after death, that God's grace comes to us. So when their bodies have been exhumed, and the tombs open, and they begin to offer these beautiful spiritual fragrances and have remained incorrupt, it is a witness of eternity and of what God's grace can do even to a physical dead body, let alone to the soul. So for those reasons, the Church doesn't accept cremation, because it is the destruction of God's creation, violent destruction of God's creation. And it is actually quite a violent process, as one of our funeral directors has described to me once. He says it's not this nice, peaceful, slipping the body into this, as you see the music turn on, the body just slips away into eternity. He says, what happens in there is the amount of heat that has to be generated to destroy the body. Just arms and limbs flailing all over the place, things being thrown. It is a horrible thing to witness, which most people miss. But and that's why we've the Church has always accepted cremation to be a pagan thing. The Jews bury, the Muslims bury, Christians bury. Belief in one God, in a sense, demands that you honour in a creator God demands that you honour the body. So that's cremation. Now, organ donation is a bit more difficult, because it seems to me that there are two important and valuable things that are in tension here. And one is love, that to donate organs, to give life to someone else, can be understood as an act of love. And the other is, again, this respect that we pay the body and the life of the person who's already been given. Now, science has allowed us to sort of, cross over and do things that we ultimately couldn't have imagined even a few decades ago. My concern with organ donation is, firstly, is the person who's donating their organs really dead? And I think that's an important question. Brain dead doesn't always mean, really truly dead like the notion said about the witch of the Wizard of Oz. It can mean that, the person, and people have come back from that. So, is the person truly dead? Or are we harvesting certain living organs, which are usually, organs that have blood pumping through them, which is the only way they can be preserved. Though scientists are saying we can be moving beyond that now, but we'll see how it goes. That's my major concern, I suppose. And the secondary concern is, I suppose, the desecration of the body itself. I mean, pulling bits and pieces out of it, and it's going beyond just internal organs down to eyes, I'm sure, skin and stuff like that, will eventually sort of stripping the body. So those are the two tensions. I give you my personal inclination, tends to the negative, is to no organ donation, but I can see why people do it. And Jesus did say, there is no greater love that man has than to give his life for his brother. That's a pretty big thing as well.